Can't think of anything right now. My name's Ed. My story starts in 1949. I was born to two parents who didn't really want to have children at that time. And ultimately, 6 years later, I wound up in a children's home where I grew up until I was 18 years old. And during that time, of course, when you don't have your real parents, you grow up with people who really don't really care for you that much. But I did the best I could, and I got out of there when I was 18 years old. After high school, got drafted, had to go to Vietnam, made it through there and came back home, and didn't have a place to live on the street. But on the street, didn't have a lot of food to eat, had to do a lot of things I didn't want to do, stealing things like that, just to get by. So I joined the military for the second time. The second time I went to the Army. First time was the Marine Corps. I stayed in the Army until 1980. And then during that time, I started having some health problems. And I didn't quite know what was going on. I had planned on staying in the military for as long as I possibly could, if I could make it to 20 years. But there was something going on in my health. I didn't know what was going on. I had this severe pain in my chest. And during those days, since there was no war going on, in the late 70s and leading up to the 80s, you had to stay in physically fit shape in order to pass a physical and qualify to stay in the military. I was having problems with that. I noticed it one day when I had to run a mile. I started having pains in my chest, and I didn't know what they were. The pains didn't only hurt me when I ran. I noticed when I had to do the other physical activities for the test, sit-ups, push-ups, things like that, I was having this serious pain in my chest and I didn't know what it was. I got concerned. So I started to go to since I was stationed in Presidio, San Francisco, it was a military hospital. I started seeing the doctors there, and they kept telling me, well, we don't see anything wrong with you. Maybe we can give you something that, try to ease the pain you got. So they gave me some anti-inflammatories. That was the beginning of a long journey of pain and suffering. Like I said, I had to give up my journey with the military because I couldn't pass the physical fitness trainings. So after I got out, I continued to have these pains. Even though I had to get out, I had to get a job. I got a job working for the state of California. I was working as a correctional peace officer. I had to go to work every day with that pain still in my chest, in my shoulders, my low back, my hips were hurting. There was no answer for what was going on with me. I started going to see doctors over and over and over again, and they said, well, Jesus, can't seem to find anything wrong with you. I finally saw a couple of orthopedic surgeons who told me that we need to take some x-rays and a lot of blood tests and we can find out what's going on with you. I went through all of that. There was no diagnosis that they can give me for sure. And they asked me, had I been through any traumatic experiences in the past or anything like that? And I said, well, the most traumatic thing I had been involved in was my time during Vietnam. You can imagine the traumatic times you go through there. I must have gotten hurt there and then realized just how bad it was. Some suggested that perhaps I was suffering from the effects of Agent Orange. There was no testing at that time for Agent Orange, and I had not been registered with the VA at that time, so I didn't even know I had the right to go to VA for medical treatment. The only answers I had from that point on was medications. They gave me medication after medication. I must have had 30, 40 medications, NSAIDs, things that caused a lot of other pain and suffering in my body. Eventually, after 20 years, taking all this pain medication that didn't work, I wound up having organ problems, liver problems. I have liver damage. My adrenal glands were shutting down. My heart was terribly irregular heartbeat. At some point, I developed a brain aneurysm. my health was going down pretty fast in a 3-year period. And it didn't seem to be anyone that could tell me, what was going on. Someone said, you better go to the VA. You might be suffering from something that affected you during the war. So that was my introduction to the Veterans Administration. The Veterans Administration didn't have any tests, like I said, for Agent Orange or anything like that. And they kept saying, well, we can't find anything wrong with you, but you do have something wrong, but we don't know exactly what it is. They also gave me medication after medication. I mean, I was taking 60 different medications for pain, inflammation, depression, and you name it. I was going through it. And it wasn't very much I could look forward to. Matter of fact, it added a lot to my depression. I mean, like, where am I going to go? What can I do? I'm suffering. My legs were like, they looked like elephant. I had elephantitis, if you can picture that. My legs were so full of fluid. And my doctors were telling me, oh, you know what? You got a problem with your heart. Matter of fact, one doctor says, well, you need a pacemaker. Your heart is terribly out of rhythm, and this is causing the edema in your body. You need to get this done, or you could die. Oh my gosh, one more thing I got to go through. I had all these other problems. Now my heart's going bad. So after I got out of the military in 1980, I met my ex-wife. We were married for several years and had a wonderful son. His name was David, who's been a tremendous help to me. If it had not been for my son, I probably would not be here today. He didn't want to see his dad suffering anymore. He started looking into things, alternative medicine, things I could do to possibly change the direction that I was going in. I didn't really want to go along with it. I said, well, the doctor said this. And he said, Dad, son told me, he says, Dad, you can't just listen to the doctors. They sent you home, and there's nothing they can do. He was really concerned at that time because I had been playing music with a band, and that was one of the things I liked to do, pastime. And it was Christmas Eve one year, and I had a stroke on stage that night on Christmas Eve. I almost lost my life. Came back home, and my bandmates told my son, what had happened the night before, and I asked him to watch out for me. Had another stroke right before his eyes. Of course, I had to go to the hospital, and when I got to the hospital, I guess the news wasn't good for me. They said, well, he's got an aneurysm in his brain, his heart's bad, his adrenal glands are shutting down, he's got a liver problem. The way his condition is now, we really can't do much for him. You're going to have to send him home and, maybe prepare for his demise. My son wasn't having that. David said, no, I'm going to find a way. I'll find a way. Of course, when David gave me this information, I was thinking like, oh, come on. If it was that easy, then why in the heck wouldn't the doctors tell me that? He says, Dad, you got nothing to lose. Let's give it a shot. Like, okay. I was stubborn about it, but okay. First thing we did was got rid of the edema in my legs. I remember David putting these wraps around my legs. I don't know what they were, but they were warm wraps. He put them around my legs and got my legs warm, and all those things helped me immensely. It wasn't 2 weeks, and the edema was disappearing out of my legs, soon to be gone. That was my first eye-opener I ever had. I'm going like, how could this be? I couldn't believe it. For the first time in my life, my son had probably did save my life, because I was probably on 50, 60 medications by the time I got to that point, and there was nothing that anybody could do for me. And so we continued on that avenue of taking supplementation to the point where eventually I began to heal everywhere. The medical establishment will not admit that they can be wrong about anything. It's a lie. That's not true. And I'm here to tell everybody that if there's any way that you have enough time in your life, investigate, ask questions, and I'm telling you, you'll be surprised at the difference that your life will take. Sure, you'll have to make some changes. I had to make a lot of changes too. I wasn't a person that had a lot of self-esteem. And 2011, that was supposed to be my year of death. I couldn't get in the car. I couldn't get out of the car. I couldn't get in the car. I had to crawl in. I couldn't plant my feet on the floor to get out of bed. I kind of slithered out of bed. I couldn't comb my hair. I couldn't wash my hair. I couldn't lift my arms up. I'm not just saying this. I'm still here. I'm 71 now. I was supposed to be gone a long time ago. Had it not been for these things introduced to me by my son, I would be long, long gone. It'd be a memory. But like I said, I'd gotten out of the military. I didn't have much choice about that. But then when I became married, I thought that would be something that I would enjoy and look forward to. But that didn't work out. And I thought maybe, well, now I've got another issue. I've got an emotional problem that I have to deal with. One day David gave me a suggestion. He said, Dad, take a piece of paper and write a line right down the center of it. Run one side, write down the things that you think you don't like about yourself. On the other side on the paper, write down all the things that are positive, have been positive in your life. Things that would make you happy, things like that. And compare the two. He says, and look at both of those lists and then see which one you are. The one on the right was the one that I had more positive things listed than the other side. And he said, that's the side, that's who you are. And you see it before you now. Now you have a choice. It snuck up on you, but now you have a choice. One of the best exercises I've ever come across. I don't know if you all have a David in your family, but I know if you have an opportunity to meet my son, I know David has a heart for people, and I know he likes to help people. He certainly has helped me. I'm probably his number one champion. I know I'm his number one champion, and he's my number one hero. And all that he's shared with me, I have shared with others. I have friends that have been sick, and friends who have been healed. And everyone that I know that's come across David can attest to the fact that he cares about people. He's a loving person, and he knows that the system of the world that we live in today is not a good one. No, we have the choice to make the changes. You'd be surprised. Put that line down the center of that page on that piece of paper and write down the fears and things that you think about. And on the other hand, write down all the good things you can say about yourself and your life. And then you can see it before your eyes and then make that choice. Say, this is me. No one's going to stop you from being you except you. So, you make that choice. That's all it takes is taking that first step. And from that first step, put the other foot in front of the other and keep going first for the rest of your life.